Welcome everyone to another episode on the Couch with the Unconventional CA. We have a very special guest today from the corporate space. But before I even get into who he is and what he does, I just want to remind you all SMMEs out there, if you are struggling with your business or you're wanting an overview as to where you could potentially improve with your business, drop us an email at support@theunconventionalca.org and we'll happily load you up onto our platform and allow you to complete our diagnostic and then provide you with the reports as to what your roadmap to success will look like over the next 6 to 12 months. Today's guest that I have with us is Yusuf Bodiat, the CFO for FEM. Yusuf, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Etienne. Pleasure to be here.
Yusuf, you've got an extensive experience and background, not only as a CA, but in the funding and finance element of things. The work that you've done with FEM, I've seen around how you've empowered SMMEs through your loan funding mechanisms has created multiple jobs and created significant impact in the economy. I just want to get straight into it when it comes to funding for SMMEs, because this is a big topic and hot topic a lot of SMMEs often struggle with, where they say we don't have access to funding, we can't access funding, so we can't grow our business. And they feel that this is the showstopper for it. So my main first question would be for you, when you're evaluating recipients for ESD funding or SMME funding, what do you think is the key criteria and considerations that SMMEs need to be mindful of before they go for funding?
So starting off with tough questions up front, which I like. So I don't think there's a rule book that every funder uses. Every funder has their own type of business model. How we do it differently is we partner with organizations who disperse the funding on our behalf. So we're not specialists in ESD funding, so we don't try to play in that area directly. We partner with big organizations who do this on a day-to-day basis. And I think for the organizations we partner with, it's going to sound simple, but it's not as simple as it sounds. Is the funding, if it's a grant funding, you'd need to see a return on investment. If it's loan funding, the money needs to be paid back. So the business model needs to make logical and financial sense in order for you to get your return on investment for the funding to even be considered. If the business case doesn't make logical sense, or if it makes logical sense but you can't see that coming through in the presentation or the discussions with the entrepreneurs, it's not going to get through step one. So it's just the business logic behind it needs to be foolproof, if I can call it that.
You use a critical word there, business model needs to make sense. Now, I come across many SMMEs who say, I have this idea, I have this business, but I need the funding for it. Now, to that business model, let's maybe elaborate around that. What would you say are 2 or 3 things that would make sense when reviewing a business model or a business case around that for you?
Okay, so as a funder or a company that wants to help SMMEs, the business logic comes through in the numbers. So you want to see how the revenue projections work. You want to see what the costs are and how that organization is supposed to make money over time. I think where entrepreneurs struggle is that they understand what they're selling and they understand how they produce a product and who they're selling it to, but they struggle to put the numbers into play. I mean, if you use an example for those of us who've watched Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, the entrepreneur always comes up with this fantastic pitch. And as soon as the dragons or the sharks start asking questions of how many units or how much this costs or whatever, that's where the business owners struggle. So you need to understand the numbers that drive the business quite closely for the investor to understand, because the investors want to see the numbers, not just the idea behind the concept.
So understanding your numbers is very critical, and many SMMEs just want to often brush aside finance and compliance itself. You now are speaking in the hot seat of, okay, I've got funding available through our funding partners, but you need to understand your numbers. So what's the essence, if you have to say, not only using a CA hat, but just in general as a finance person, why is finance then so important for SMMEs?
So I think if you get the numbers wrong, the business is probably going to fail. And let's use an example to unpack it a bit. If the SMME needs a vehicle, I wouldn't want to see just a type of vehicle with a cost associated to it. I'd like to see how that vehicle is going to be financed. Some thought process into how the interest rate works and how the financing component works. If the SMME is purchasing a vehicle that makes sense from an economic perspective, or just a flashy vehicle, as weird as it may sound, to go to the extent to say, this is how much my fuel bill is going to be for the next 12 months. So if I'm going to grow my business in a certain way, I'm going to travel X amount of kilometers and fuel is going to cost so much. What's the insurance going to be? How often do I need to replace tires? Now, I, as a funder, maybe won't need to see the detail behind the calculations, but if the person can explain that they've gone through that thought process to say that I'm not just buying a vehicle for 200,000 and paying it off over 5 years, but it's going to cost me X amount for the installments and X for all of these additional costs like insurance, maintenance, etc. It shows that they understand the impact of that asset has on their business, and they actually understand how much it's going to cost. So again, I may not want to see the detail behind it, but just an understanding that the entrepreneur understands how much items are going to cost. It gives me comfort that they have confidence in what they're doing.
SMMEs out there, make sure you understand the crux of your numbers and what drives your figures. You're hearing it from the horse's mouth. Who better to tell you than them themselves? So in that light there, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs and small business owners who are seeking funding or support to grow their business, knowing that these are the fundamentals that they need to look out for?
Yeah, so I think I say we as in individuals, when we're pitching a business case, you want to show all the positives about it. And it's easy to show all the positives. I'm going to grow my business in so many years and I'm going to make so much money. But I think you need to take a step back and show all the risks or the challenges with your business and how you're going to manage that. To actually look at it from an outsider's perspective to say what could go wrong and how I'm going to manage it. That could help with the business case. So the business case shouldn't only be blue skies and what's the best that could happen. You need to show all of the risks associated. So risk management, if I can use a fancy word for that. And demonstrate that you've thought about it and how you're going to deal with it when or if that risk event happens. Also, start criticizing the business model. So as a funder, it's human nature to look at what could go wrong. As an owner, you're looking at the positives. So look at it from the outside, ask what could go wrong, how could this business crash, and start answering those questions, because funders are not going to ask about the positives. They're going to ask about all of the negatives in the business model.
So in a nutshell, if I have to summarize what you're saying, is actually put yourself in your audience's shoes and get to understand what they might be looking for before actually presenting your business case.
That's it. And I would go a step further to get your friends or people you trust to actually review that business model and criticize it. It's very difficult to take criticism from people we know, but I think that's the best way to actually understand where the shortfalls are. Because if I were to prepare a business case, I could only go so far to criticizing it before I have blinkers on for myself to find out all those risks or critiques of it. So get an outsider who you trust to criticize it and ask all of those difficult questions before, because your main objective is to go for a presentation, as an example, and have it watertight. So you present it, you have answers for all of the questions, and go out there feeling like you've won something.
I love that, Yusuf. I think for all our audience out there listening, we've got a freebie offering for you here today. If you're struggling with your business model or with your financial model and understanding the crux of it, drop us an email at support@theunconventionalca.org and we'll give you a free business model case drafted by us and one of our internal team members to help you access your funding so that you can be prepared the next time you're in front of your funder to explain and understand how those models actually work and what are the drivers for those funding. You've brought up some critical aspects and key points around the funding mechanisms, but there's many challenges that SMMEs face, right? I want to hear from you. What challenges do small businesses typically face when it comes to accessing funding, and how do these organizations then address these challenges?
Good question. So I think the key part is when a small business goes to a bank, a traditional bank, for funding, the bank would look at that small business very objectively, look at the numbers that we spoke about and see if it makes business sense. And if they don't have any collateral to back their business, they're not going to get funding. So it's something where you need to find, let's say, alternative sources of funding from entities that specialize in ESD funding, because a traditional bank firstly may not provide the funding, and if they do, it's going to be too expensive. That's just the way it works, and the banks are going to be cutthroat in terms of you not being able to pay if that difficult event happens. So with a specialist provider, they actually would, or often, understand your business, what makes your business tick, and then structure your funding or your funding in whatever way that makes sense for your business, rather than a traditional banking view which looks at a desktop analysis and goes forward from there. So it's important to find the right funder for you, not just a funder, but the right funder who understands your business and who can support you, rather than only be there when you're not paying.
So you use the word right funder, and to your point, it's not just chasing the money, but having that individual who provides you with the money but also understands your business and is able to provide more than just money. Why is that so important? Because SMMEs so often chase money, but they don't realize that there's other benefits that can come if you have the right funding partner.
Yeah, so I'll give an example of a funding initiative we embarked on. So we recently launched a loan funding program for small black asset managers. Now, why we did that was because these managers can go to banks and get funding, but the terms are quite strict. You start paying from month one. Your interest rates are fixed at a certain way. Your loan is not subordinated, which means it has a certain impact on their balance sheet. And what we did differently is, firstly, we gave them an interest-free loan. It helps us from a BEE points perspective, but it also is a way of us to give back. So interest-free loan is something many traditional banks wouldn't do. The second part that we did also, because we understand their businesses, giving a loan funding now won't change their business overnight. It takes time to change their business. So for the first year, we gave them a payment holiday. As an example, the loan may be for 5 years. They only pay from year 2 onwards. And the third part, because we were involved with specialists who understood their business models, we even subordinated their loans. So it has a different impact on their balance sheet when they need to speak to regulators or other investors. So it's a specialized approach that we took to structure the loan that makes sense for them and actually helps them in the long term. When you do that, you actually get more buy-in from them also. So because you're giving them a bit of leeway, it feels like they sometimes would try a little bit harder to make you happy and pay the interest when it's due, pay the loan when it's due. So structuring it and make it very tailored for each individual company.
You use the critical word alternative service providers out there instead of just banks. Now, many SMMEs just want to chase the bank and they don't know that there are these other funding organizations out there. Do you have any recommendations on which funding entities are out there that the SMMEs can actually go out and approach?
Yeah, so we've partnered with an organization called Inyosi. They're a specialist ESD funding company for small entities. They do enterprise development and supplier development. And what's interesting about theirs is they give loan funding. They've got about a 500 million rand loan fund. But their organization is tailored to deal with small companies where they'll physically go on site and understand what the business does. And they tailor the loans to an extent, obviously, to meet the requirements of that organization.
And any other entities besides them?
Yeah, so I think Inyosi is the one that we deal with the most. I think an easy Google search can do that. The challenge we got always is when you search for financing, your Google searches show you the top banks. But if you tailor your searches better, SMME funding, tailored solutions, structured solutions, find a host of organizations that are there. I think what's key is once you find those, again, find which one is right for you.
SMMEs, if you're struggling to find any funding partners itself, you're also welcome to just drop us an email at info@unconventionalca.org and we'll happily put you in touch with all our strategic funding alliance partners as well. Yusuf, those are critical points that you've brought up just on the funding aspect. But I want to pivot a bit on, before even getting to funding, there's a development component that SMMEs often just want to brush off, where they say, I know everything, I've been in it, you don't need to teach me anything.
Yeah.
Why do you think, or what role do you think mentorship and coaching or training plays in the success of SMMEs before they even go to request funding?
Yeah, so I think we often do that, but it seems weak to ask for help or to ask for mentoring or anything like that. But I think it's always easier to learn from the mistakes of others, right? So the mentors that you find would have gone through the same challenges and failures that you're going through. It's important to go through that process because, again, we're only looking at the positives of our organization or our business model. We're not looking at what could go wrong. You're not learning from others' mistakes. So it's critical to get that type of insight from someone who's walked that journey before to get that extra bit of input. because you may understand your product as it stands now and your business model, but how it impacts everybody around you, you may not know that yet. You can do a lot of research, but no one has the time to do that. So get that advice from others who've gone through that process, who can give you valuable advice in a short space of time.
I love what you've said. You've just summarized it well. If you want to fast track your rate of success, follow someone who's been down that path you ideally want to be, because you can learn from their mistakes very, very quickly as to what you need to avoid, but you can also replicate all the success criterias that they have already implemented, which have worked well for you. So it just fast tracks your journey to the end destination.
That's it.
Okay, man. I love that. Let's get into some fun and learn more about you as Yusuf. Who are you? What keeps you awake at night? What's the things that you do for downtime that you suggest to others to incorporate to manage life? You know, sometimes we get so intense and immersed into our everyday lifestyle and we forget that we need to enjoy life.
Yeah, so I'm a 37-year-old CA, born and bred in Johannesburg. I've been at FEM for 5 years now as a CFO, and I really enjoy it just because we've got a social aspect to the work we do, and I think we've spent enough time for you to understand all of the special things we do. But what's key about my work at FEM is we've got an education foundation where we spend a lot of time in education and leadership development. That got me thinking about how else I could work on that. So I do a bit of extra work outside on a school governing body in a way to give back also. But I also found that the career I have now is not the career I want forever. So I'm doing certain things, again, outside of work to make sure I position myself for the future. Because I think the work environment is changing completely. We can't be working for in the way our parents worked 30 and 40 years ago. There's this gig economy and the hybrid work and all of these fancy terms that we throw out there that's changing that. So I think it's adapting to all of that. Work is always busy. Work is often stressful. And we may have not played golf as much as we like to, but those are the things we do. Play golf, go to the gym, go for a run, watch TV, eat junk food. That makes it a little bit easier.
And when you say easier now, for those like watching out there, some people are so immersed into their everyday life and business itself. They don't want to, or they often neglect, not purposefully, but just because they feel they're in this hamster wheel itself. Why do you think that's so important?
So if you Google, there's a speech from one of the CEOs of Coca-Cola where he spoke about the different balls. I think there's 5 balls. And he said there's work and family and religion, etc. And work was the rubber ball, and all the other ones I think are glass balls. So if you drop any of them, they can shatter. And I think family was the main glass ball. The problem we have is we treat work as the glass ball, where that's the one rubber ball that can bounce back. So it's the mindset we're in, because everyone is rushing and everyone's in this rat race. Because at the end of the day, if you don't work, you're not going to earn an income and you're not going to succeed in traditional terms. But I think that work-life balance helps, because if you're in a good space at home and physically and emotionally, it's supposed to help your work. And if you're in a bad space, it's just going to make your work spiral out of control. It's easier said than done. When there's a deadline, you end up working late nights and weekends. But I think it's forcing yourself, like strategically forcing yourself to do those things outside of work to make it easier. Because the one thing I realized is work is never meant to be fun. It's not always meant to be fun or easy. Work is work. You're going there for a purpose and you're getting paid for doing a job. So it's not supposed to be your happy place always. Yes, you're supposed to have a job that you enjoy and people you work with that you like, but you need to find things outside of work to keep that balance, if I can call it that.
I love that what you've mentioned is sometimes it's always going to be a grind, and you have to have other mechanisms that allow you to defuse, to allow you to bring your best self at work, ultimately.
Yeah, I think the misconception is when you're at work from 8 till 5, you're working, and outside of that, you on personal time. But I think the environment has changed where you may work very hard for 1 or 2 weeks, but then you get downtime after that. You may need to work for a weekend or 2, but then the next week may be easier at work. So I think that balancing act is different from what we normally thought it was.
Well, you've mentioned an interesting cycle. You work hard for probably 1 or 2 weeks, and then you have a bit of downtime. The entrepreneurship ecosystem is very much like that. You're going to have cycles of extreme pressure and then downtimes where it'll be quiet. And so to your point, then managing a balanced lifestyle is critical. Otherwise, you're not going to, when the heap of the pressure comes in, not going to be able to deliver effectively, right?
And I think the key is, if you're starting off, it's easy to start those good habits. Once you're in that rat race and you've developed all those bad habits, it's difficult to change and unlearn what you've taught yourself.
Great, I like that. Habits. Entrepreneurs, start building the right habits early on. If you don't do that, you're going to find yourself in a rat race trying to unwind cobwebs within your own ecosystem. Yusuf, I want to just touch a bit on ESD. For those who don't understand what ESD is, can you just define for our listeners how to familiarize the concept of ESD and what critical role it plays in our country from an economic standpoint and even from a job creation perspective, and the role SMMEs itself play in it?
Yeah. So the technical definition, ESD, Enterprise Supplier Development. And I think, for me at least, the key is the development part in there. Whether it's an enterprise, so someone you're not, an organization you're not working with, or suppliers, an organization that you're working with, you need to find ways to develop them. So the development part is key there. And I think for me, what's interesting about ESD is, to an extent, we're forced to implement ESD initiatives and fund it because of our BEE scorecards. But I think it goes much further than that. Because if you think about the concept, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The same way, the big organizations are getting work from us, and I say us collectively, and we're not assisting the smaller organizations like the SMMEs. So the bigger organizations are getting richer and bigger, and the small ones are not surviving. So we've actually got a responsibility to promote ESD. So use the small suppliers where you can, even if it's not in your main scale projects, in the smaller projects, to give them that advantage of just learning how your business works and earning some income and growing their business. Because I mean, we know what the unemployment stats are in this country. It's disgusting, and it's our fault to an extent, because if we're only assisting the big organizations, the small ones are set up for failure before they even start. So it's a way to ease the pressure on unemployment, and it's for a whole lot of economic transformation. I mean, the country could be seen as falling apart right now, but if all of the unemployed people are working and enjoying what they're doing, and we're supporting them, we'd be in a different space right now.
You raise a valid point around mindfully supporting SMMEs out there as corporates. Now, I might put you on the spot itself. What do you think the role of corporates then actually should be when it comes to BEE itself? Many organizations still feel it's just a tick box exercise and we're just doing it for BEE points. I know you well. We've worked and understood the FEM model and how it's done. It's not just for BEE. It's actually social consciously making change for the right reason BEE was set up. Do you think there's a missing gap in this space at the moment?
Yeah, there is a gap, and you're 100% spot on. It's currently, for many, not all, a tick box exercise. So once your financials are completed, you work out your spend for next year and you put a budget towards it. And that's the points we're going to target, and that's the budget we're going to spend towards it. I think just because everyone's targeting profits, you don't have the time or the energy or the manpower to actually focus on ESD. But if we actually spend a little bit of our own time understanding how ESD works and using one or two suppliers at a time to try and develop them, I think it will change that mindset in how we approach it, rather than throwing money at a problem that is not going to get fixed on its own, to try and help it on your own. So I think it's that whole mindset change. But start off small with one organization and then see if it can be scaled up after that. I think also the world is changing in that, as much as we are focused on profits and cost-cutting techniques, etc., if you can show the return on investment from ESD funding, that could get buy-in from your shareholders or stakeholders as to why you should put a better or more strategic budget around it.
You use the interesting word return on investment from an ESD perspective. Now, I'm asking you to put your commercial hat on here as a corporate sitting at an executive role. What do you think are potentially 2 or 3 critical ROI factors you would consider from this when considering enterprise and supply development funding and dealing with implementation partners?
Yeah, so I think if we use an example, let's, for argument's sake, say we took on a supplier on an ESD program that had 3 or 4 employees, And the return on investment is not always financial. So yes, they have to pay back the loan if it's a loan. If it's a grant, they have to be showing value to your organization. But the return on investment is non-financial, where you should see their headcount increasing over time, or you should see their client base or their revenue increasing over time. It's, again, easier said than done. It sounds very wishy-washy, but if you can show the return on investment for non-financial and show the actual impact it's having, and the ripple effect it can have, that's how you can show the benefit of it. Not easy, but it's something we need to do.
Not easy, certainly. And no, I don't think anyone's got a bulletproof solution for this itself. But if I hear what you're saying, it's more incorporating an ESG lens to it from a return on investment perspective and potentially some UN SDG goals.
Yes. So I think for corporates who present fancy, glossy annual reports, it's easy to do that. So you can justify, we're going to invest a lot more money into ESG so we can put the pictures up on the website and report, which is perfectly fine because you've got a marketing angle to it. But I think the other corporates also need to start following, where you're linking it to the SGD principles and ESG and all of these new hot topics that we're speaking about, because as much as profit is the main thing we're targeting, the sustainability of the organization also is quite important. At some point, the new generations are going to support companies that focus on broader aspects rather than just profit motives.
I love the work you guys are doing. I have to commend you that you've got this broader spectrum out there. Corporates out there, if you're watching this and you're listening to our podcast today, if you need assistance with aligning your UN SDG goals and ESG goals from an enterprise and supply development in our local context of South Africa, reach out to us. We'll happily have a discussion with you to see how we incorporate our reporting from an impact perspective and show you the ROI from an ESG and a UN SDG goals aspect there. Yusuf, lastly, how can any individuals, organizations, or even government contribute to the success of SMME funding initiatives? You know, you made a critical point previously. A lot of the traditional tier 1, tier 2 institutions just want collateral as a backing, and many SMMEs don't have this collateral. So what do we do differently to make it more flexible and give these early businesses who have a valid business case, they know their numbers, they understand their business model, and they've put thought process through it, they've got a customer market and demand for it itself, but they're still struggling because I don't have this asset, I don't have this collateral, what do I do now? What do you think there's a role or dynamic in our country that can change?
Yes, I think from a corporate perspective, if an organization wanted to start off an ESG program for the first time, I'd say instead of doing it yourself, partner with someone. So the likes of Inyosi that we've done with, because they've got the business model in place. They've been doing this for a number of years and they've got the scale up of their program. So if you've got a small budget, instead of trying to do something small and meaningful but small and not have a big impact, partner with an organization, invest in them, and then build up your capital over time. And once you're big enough and you've built up that reserves or the funding, then you can start your own programs. But I think we often fail in that we've got this really fantastic idea and we want to do it ourselves, but we don't know how to and we don't have the time and resources. Rather partner with someone who can do it on your behalf. And then over time, you can bring it back in-house.
I love it what you say. It's not often everyone wants to take that humbleness off the shoulder and say, you know what, I'm not an expert in this field. Here's an expert. Let me actually collaborate and partner with them and get them to deliver the right results for us.
Yeah, that's it.
Where can our viewers find you, learn more about you, follow you?
Yeah, so search for me on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn and we can connect there.
Okay, great. So viewers out there, if you want to find more about Yusuf, please follow him on LinkedIn. Don't forget our special offering that I offered you today in this podcast. Drop us an email at support@theunconventionalca.org and we'll help one lucky viewer build his financial model ready for funding. Till next time.